My name is Celia, and at 63, I've spent most of my life surrounded by books as a librarian in Boston. My daughter Megan and I were once inseparable, sharing everything from heartaches to triumphs. That changed after she married Greg, a man whose charming smile masked his need for control. I never expected that during a family dinner at their home, my own daughter would rip my phone from my hands and smash it against their Italian marble floor. Her eyes were cold when she said those words I'll never forget. If you're watching this from somewhere in your own safe space, hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I disappeared the very next day, reclaiming my life one brave step at a time. I grew up in a quiet suburb of Boston, the daughter of a high school math teacher and a nurse. Our family wasn't wealthy, but my parents instilled in me a love of learning and independence that shaped my entire life. My mother always told me, "Celia, your mind is the one thing nobody can take from you," a sentiment that would resonate deeply many decades later. Books became my sanctuary early on. I spent hours at our local library befriending the kind librarian Mrs. Winters, who never seemed annoyed by my endless questions. By 14, I was volunteering there after school shelving books and helping with children's reading programs. It seemed natural that I would pursue library science in college, drawn to the peaceful purpose of connecting people with knowledge. I met Frank during my sophomore year at the University of Massachusetts. He was studying engineering, serious and thoughtful, with a quiet humor that caught me by surprise. Our first conversation happened in the university library, where he was researching a project and I was working part-time. He asked for help finding technical journals, and I noticed he had a Kurt Vonnegut novel tucked under his textbooks. That small detail told me he balanced practicality with imagination, a combination I found irresistible. We married after graduation in a simple ceremony with yellow roses and books as centerpieces. Frank took a position with an engineering firm in Boston, and I secured a job at the Boston Public Library's main branch. We bought a modest 2-story home in a tree-lined neighborhood, planning to fill it with children and books. Life had other plans, however, and after several difficult years trying to conceive, we were blessed with just one child, our daughter Megan. From the moment she was born, Megan became the center of our universe. Frank built her bookshelves before she could even sit up, and I read to her every night, watching her eyes track the pictures with intense focus. She was precocious, walking early and speaking in full sentences before many of her playgroup peers. I still remember her at 3 years old, sitting in the children's section of my library, reading to the stuffed animals arranged in a semicircle around her. As Megan grew, our bond deepened. Frank often joked that we had our own secret language, finishing each other's sentences and exchanging glances that communicated volumes. Through elementary and middle school, Megan thrived, balancing academic achievement with a healthy social life. I attended every school play, science fair, and soccer game, cheering her on, while Frank captured everything on our bulky video camera. The teenage years brought typical challenges: mood swings, boundary testing, first crushes, but our communication remained open. When Megan experienced her first heartbreak at 16, she cried in my arms all night. I shared stories of my own youthful disappointments, assuring her that pain was temporary but would make her stronger. Frank made her favorite chocolate chip pancakes the next morning, and we formed a protective circle of love around her wounded heart. College admissions were a stressful time, but Megan's hard work paid off with acceptance to several excellent schools. She chose Northwestern University's journalism program, determined to become a writer. Sending her off to Chicago was one of the hardest moments of my life, but I reminded myself that we had raised her to be independent, to spread her wings beyond our nest. During her college years, Megan gradually shifted her focus from journalism to marketing, discovering a talent for strategic communication. Our phone calls remained frequent, and she came home for every major holiday, filling our house with stories of campus life and internships. Frank and I visited her in Chicago twice a year, proudly watching her grow into a confident young woman. After graduation, Megan landed a position at a boutique marketing firm in Boston, allowing her to move back to her hometown. Those first few years of her career were exciting. She lived in a small apartment with a college friend, worked long hours climbing the professional ladder, and still made time for weekly dinners with Frank and me. We celebrated her promotions together, dispensed advice when requested, and stepped back when appropriate, respecting her adult independence. Everything changed when Frank was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The 18 months that followed were a blur of hospital visits, treatment plans, brief, hopeful reminders, and long, darkening shadows of reality. Throughout it all, Megan was our rock. She took family medical leave to be with us during Frank's final weeks, handling insurance paperwork, coordinating with hospice, and still finding time to read engineering magazines to her father when his eyes became too tired to focus. After Frank passed, Megan helped me navigate the overwhelming logistics of grief, funeral arrangements, thank you notes to well-wishers, sorting through Frank's belongings. We cried together over his collection of novelty ties, laughed at the meticulous labels on his toolbox drawers, and held each other through waves of sorrow that sometimes seemed unbearable. In those dark days, our bond felt unbreakable. For the next 2 years, we settled into a new normal. I returned to my position at the library, finding comfort in the familiar rhythms and the sympathetic embraces of longtime colleagues. Megan continued advancing in her career, eventually becoming a senior marketing executive at a larger firm with national clients. We maintained our tradition of Sunday dinners, though the absence of Frank's chair at the head of the table remained a visual reminder of our loss. Megan met Greg at a charity gala her firm was promoting. He was handsome and confident from a wealthy family with connections throughout Boston's business community. Their romance moved quickly. Within 3 months, he was accompanying her to our Sunday dinners. I remember being struck by his perfect appearance, tailored suits, immaculate haircuts, and a smile that seemed practiced rather than spontaneous. But he was unfailingly polite, bringing expensive wines and complimenting my home, and Megan clearly adored him. Their wedding was an elaborate affair at the Four Seasons Hotel, far grander than anything our family had ever hosted. I felt somewhat out of place among Greg's relatives, with their polished accents and casual references to summer homes and European vacations. During the reception, I overheard Greg's mother commenting to a friend that Megan was quite accomplished despite her modest background, a comment that stung, but that I chose not to share with my daughter. The first changes in our relationship were subtle. Megan began cancelling our standing dinner plans, citing work emergencies or obligations with Greg's family and business associates. When we did meet, Greg was nearly always present, dominating conversations with stories about his investment successes or name-dropping connections. He would often check his watch when I spoke about my library programs or book recommendations, signaling boredom that Megan began to mirror. About a year into their marriage, Megan called to announce her pregnancy. I was ecstatic at the prospect of becoming a grandmother, immediately offering to help prepare the nursery and assist after the birth. Greg interjected on the speakerphone, explaining that they had already hired an interior designer for the nursery and would have a full-time nanny. My role, he suggested, could be occasional visits when it's convenient for everyone. Emma was born on a snowy February morning, perfect and pink and miraculous. I was allowed to visit the hospital the following day, bringing a hand-knitted blanket and a collection of classic children's books. Greg seemed annoyed by my gifts, mentioning that they had registered for appropriate items at high-end baby boutiques. Megan, exhausted from delivery, gave me a weak smile and asked if I could return another time when she was feeling stronger. Over the next few years, my time with Emma was carefully rationed. Megan and Greg moved to an exclusive suburb, increasing the distance between our homes and necessitating advance planning for any visits. When Tyler was born 2 years later, the pattern continued: limited access, supervised visits, and increasing criticism of my interactions with my grandchildren. "Mum, we don't want them eating those kinds of snacks," Megan would say when I brought homemade cookies, the same recipe I had made for her throughout childhood. "Mom, we're trying to limit screen time," she would admonish if I showed the children pictures on my phone. "Mom, those books are a bit old-fashioned, don't you think?" She would comment about the classic stories I brought to read aloud. Each criticism felt like a tiny cut, painful but not lethal in isolation. Together, they formed a pattern that slowly eroded my confidence in the presence of my daughter and her family. Greg's influence became increasingly apparent in Meghan's appearance and mannerisms. Her colourful wardrobe gave way to muted designer clothing. Her naturally curly hair was now always straightened. Her once boisterous laugh became a restrained chuckle. Even her speech patterns changed, adopting Greg's clipped, authoritative tone when giving instructions to service workers or explaining things to me. About 3 years ago, Meghan began making comments about my home. "This place is really too big for just one person, Mum. These stairs must be getting difficult to manage. Have you thought about downsizing to something more appropriate for your age?" I was 60 years old, in excellent health, active in community organisations, and perfectly capable of maintaining my beloved home. The house where Frank and I had built our life, where Meghan had grown up, was not merely shelter, but a repository of memories and comfort. The suggestion that I should abandon it felt like a request to erase a chapter of my life. Then came the day I discovered real estate listings for my neighbourhood on Meghan's laptop. She had left it open while taking a phone call during one of my visits to their home. The screen displayed properties similar to mine, with notes about potential selling prices and comparable values. When I asked her about it later, she became defensive, accusing me of snooping and insisting she was just doing research in case you ever decide to make a sensible decision about your living situation. The intrusions into my independence accelerated from there. Greg began questioning my financial decisions during family gatherings, suggesting I was not adequately planning for eventual care needs. Meghan complained about my social media posts, particularly photos of the grandchildren that I occasionally shared with my small circle of friends. "It's inappropriate to put our children online without our explicit permission for each post," she scolded, though she herself regularly featured Emma and Tyler in perfectly staged family photos on her own accounts. During this period of increasing tension, I found unexpected friendship with my new neighbour Rosa, a retired sociology professor who had moved in next door after her husband's death. Rosa was vibrant and outspoken at 65, with a shock of silver hair she refused to dye, and an infectious laugh that carried across our adjoining gardens. We bonded over shared love of books, gardening, and independence. "Your daughter sounds like she's forgotten who raised her," Rosa commented one evening as we shared tea on my porch after I recounted a particularly difficult interaction with Meghan. "Sometimes the young think they invent wisdom when they reach 30. Rosa introduced me to her book club, a diverse group of women who met monthly to discuss literature and life. Through them, I learned about a planned trip to Italy, 2 weeks exploring Tuscany and Umbria, visiting libraries and literary landmarks. The idea of travelling internationally without Frank had always seemed daunting, but surrounded by these confident women, I found myself excited by the prospect. When I mentioned the Italy trip during a family dinner, Meghan and Greg exchanged a look I had come to recognise as their silent communication of disapproval. "Is that really a good idea at your age, Celia?" Greg asked, using my first name as he always did, avoiding the familial mom that would acknowledge our relationship. "Italy can be dangerous," Meghan added. "Pickpockets target tourists, especially older women travelling alone." "I won't be alone," I reminded her. "I'll be with 7 other women, including Rosa, who has travelled extensively." "That neighbour you barely know." Meghan's tone was dismissive. "Mum, we need to have a serious conversation about your decision-making lately. Greg and I are concerned." That serious conversation was scheduled for the following week, dinner at their house on a Tuesday evening. The formal invitation itself felt ominous, so unlike our once casual family gatherings. As I prepared for the dinner, selecting a navy blue dress I knew Meghan had once complimented, I felt a growing anxiety about what awaited me. Rosa noticed my distraction that morning as we collected our mail at the same time. "Going into battle?" she asked gently. "Dinner at Meghan and Greg's," I replied. "They want to have a serious conversation." Rosa squeezed my arm. "Remember who you are, Celia. A whole person, not just someone's mother or grandmother." Her words stayed with me as I gathered printouts about the Italy trip, including the travel insurance I had purchased, and the detailed itinerary with contact information for all accommodations. I hoped that being prepared would ease Meghan's concerns, though a part of me suspected that no amount of preparation would change her mind once it was set. The ride to Megan's suburban neighborhood was tense. As my rideshare approached their imposing colonial home with its perfect landscaping and imposing columns, I received a text message from Rosa. "Courage, friend. You've raised a child, built a career, and survived loss. You can handle one dinner." Little did either of us know how that dinner would change everything. The evening sun cast long shadows across Megan and Greg's immaculate lawn as my rideshare pulled up to their circular driveway. Their house always reminded me of a showroom, beautiful but impersonal, despite the presence of two young children. The driver wished me a good evening as I stepped out, clutching my purse with the Italy trip documents tucked inside. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and approached the imposing front door. Before I could ring the bell, the door swung open. Emma stood there in a pristine white dress, her dark hair pulled back in a perfect ballet bun, so different from the messy ponytails Megan had worn at that age. "Grandma!" she exclaimed, genuine delight lighting up her face. At 4 years old, Emma hadn't yet adopted her parents' reserve around me. She threw her arms around my waist, and I bent to embrace her, inhaling the sweet scent of her strawberry shampoo. "There's my beautiful girl," I said, presenting her with a small package. "I brought you something from the library." Emma tore open the paper with excitement, revealing a bookmark with pressed flowers I had made in a workshop at the library. "It's pretty, thank you." "Emma, don't wrinkle your dress." Megan appeared in the foyer, her voice carrying a note of warning. She wore an expensive-looking black dress with minimal jewelry, her hair pulled back in a sleek chignon. "Hello, Mum. You're right on time." Her greeting came without a hug or kiss, the physical affection we had once shared now replaced by a polite nod. I noticed she was already holding a glass of wine, her second or third, judging by the slight flush on her cheeks. "Thanks for having me over," I said, maintaining the pleasantries that had become our communication currency. "The garden looks beautiful. Greg's landscaper redesigned it last month." She gestured vaguely toward the living room. "Come in. Dinner's almost ready." I followed Megan into their formal living room, where 2-year-old Tyler was playing with wooden blocks on an expensive-looking area rug. His face brightened when he saw me, and he toddled over, arms outstretched. I scooped him up, covering his chubby cheeks with kisses while he giggled. "Careful, Mom. He just had a bath," Megan cautioned, watching my lipstick warily. Greg entered from his home office, smartphone in hand as always. He nodded in my direction without looking up from the screen. "Celia, good to see you." His standard greeting delivered like a business pleasantry rather than a welcome to family. "Dinner will be ready in 15 minutes, Megan announced. "Emma, Tyler, Ms. Patricia is upstairs. Time to go up for your bedtime routine." "But Mama, Grandma just got here," Emma protested, her lower lip trembling slightly. "We have grown-up things to discuss tonight," Greg interjected, finally pocketing his phone. "You can see Grandma another time." I felt a pang watching the children being ushered upstairs by their nanny, catching Emma's backward glance of disappointment. In my day as a parent, family dinners had included children at the table, not tucked away like inconvenient accessories. "Wine, Celia," Greg offered, already pouring a glass without waiting for my response. "We've opened a nice cabernet." The living room felt staged with its pristine white furniture and abstract art pieces that looked expensive but conveyed no warmth. I perched on the edge of a sofa that seemed designed more for appearance than comfort, accepting the wine glass, while noting Greg had barely filled it halfway, unlike the generous pours in his and Megan's glasses. "How's work, Mum?" Megan asked, though her tone suggested mere politeness rather than genuine interest. "Wonderful, actually. We just launched a new digital literacy program for seniors that's been very popular." I began warming to a topic I was passionate about. "We're teaching everything from basic email to social media safety." "Speaking of social media," Greg interrupted, settling into his leather armchair like a CEO at a board meeting. "We noticed you posted pictures of Emma's dance recital last week." The abrupt topic change caught me off guard. "Just one photo with your other family members who couldn't attend." I thought, "We've discussed this, Mom. Megan cut in. No posting pictures of the children without explicit permission for each image. I'm sorry, I said, though a small part of me rebelled at apologizing for sharing a proud grandparent moment with my modest social circle of former colleagues and friends. I didn't think a single photo would. That's part of what we need to discuss tonight, Greg stated flatly. Your decision-making patterns. Before I could respond, their housekeeper appeared to announce dinner was served. We moved to the formal dining room where 3 place settings awaited at one end of a table that could seat 12. The distance between us felt both literal and metaphorical as we took our seats. An appetizer of prosciutto-wrapped asparagus was served in silence. I complimented the dish, receiving only a brief nod from Megan. The unspoken tension hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I sensed they were waiting for the right moment to launch into whatever serious conversation had been planned. That moment came as the housekeeper cleared our appetizer plates. Greg placed his elbows on the table, steepling his fingers in a gesture I'd seen him use when explaining something he considered simple to someone he considered slow. Celia, Megan and I have been concerned about you for some time now. He began, his voice carrying the practiced empathy of someone who had rehearsed his lines. Living alone in that big house, managing all those stairs, trying to maintain that old garden of yours. Megan nodded in solemn agreement. We worry, Mum. You're not getting any younger. I took a small sip of wine, needing a moment to compose my response. I appreciate your concern, but I'm perfectly capable of managing my home. The stairs keep me active, and my garden won the Neighborhood Association's award last summer. Greg exchanged a glance with Megan, that secret communication again, before reaching beside his chair to retrieve a glossy brochure which he slid across the table toward me. We've found the perfect solution. The brochure featured smiling seniors engaged in various activities under the heading Golden Sunset Retirement Village. The tagline read, "Independence with support when you need it." I stared at the pamphlet, momentarily speechless. It's a beautiful facility, Megan enthused, her voice taking on the same tone she used when trying to convince Emma to try new foods. Private apartments, daily activities, transportation to appointments. And the best part, it's only 15 minutes from our house, so we can visit regularly. And it makes financial sense, Greg added, shifting into his investment banker mode. Your house has appreciated significantly since you and Frank bought it. Selling now in this market would provide more than enough to secure your spot at Golden Sunset and still leave a healthy remainder for future needs. I placed the brochure down carefully, fighting to keep my voice steady. I have no interest in selling my home or moving to a retirement community. I'm only 63 in excellent health and perfectly happy where I am. Megan's expression hardened. Mum, be reasonable. You're being stubborn about this house because of sentimentality. Dad has been gone for 8 years. It's time to move forward. The casual dismissal of my attachment to the home Frank and I had built together felt like a physical blow. My house is not just sentimentality, Megan. It's my home. My community is there. My neighbors, my garden club, my book group. You can join new groups at Golden Sunset, Greg countered smoothly. With people your own age. My age, I repeated, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. You make it sound like I'm decrepit. I work 3 days a week at the library. I volunteer. I'm planning a trip to Italy with friends. At the mention of Italy, Greg's expression darkened. About that ill-advised trip. Megan and I think it's reckless for someone in your position to be gallivanting across Europe with people you barely know. I've known Rosa and most of the book club for over 2 years, I corrected. And what exactly do you mean by my position? Megan leaned forward, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a compassionate tone, but came across as condescending. Mum, we've noticed some concerning patterns lately. Forgetting to return phone calls, making impulsive decisions like this expensive trip, posting inappropriately online. Those aren't concerning patterns, I objected. I missed returning 1 call last month because I was at a lecture series. The Italy trip has been planned for 6 months, hardly impulsive. And sharing 1 recital photo is not inappropriate posting. Greg sighed heavily, as if explaining to a difficult child. Celia, we're trying to help you before things get worse. We think it would be best if we took a more active role in managing your affairs. The word managing sent a chill through me. What exactly does that mean? Megan reached for a folder beside her plate and opened it, revealing what appeared to be legal documents. We've drafted a plan. We would help you sell the house, manage the proceeds in a trust for your benefit, and secure your place at Golden Sunset. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. I stared at my daughter in disbelief. You've prepared legal documents about my future without consulting me. It's a draft, Greg clarified smoothly. A starting point for discussion. There is no discussion to be had, I stated firmly. I am mentally and physically capable of managing my own affairs. My home is not for sale, and I have no intention of moving into a retirement facility. The housekeeper appeared with our main course, salmon for them, chicken for me, though I couldn't recall expressing a preference. The interruption created a momentary lull in the tense conversation. I used the opportunity to reach into my purse and retrieve the Italy trip documents I had brought. If your concern is about my trip, I said, placing the papers on the table, I've purchased comprehensive travel insurance, including medical coverage. Our itinerary includes contact information for all accommodations, and we'll be traveling with a local guide in each city. Neither Megan nor Greg glanced at my carefully prepared materials. Instead, they exchanged another of their loaded looks. Greg gave a slight nod, and Megan straightened her shoulders. Mom, we're beyond the point of debating details, she said. Greg and I have decided this is the best path forward for everyone. The Golden Sunset has an opening for next month, and the real estate market is perfect right now for selling your house. You've decided, I echoed, my fork suspended mid-air. About my house, my life. As your daughter, I have a responsibility to ensure you're properly cared for as you age. Megan stated, her tone suggesting she was reciting a phrase she had practiced. I don't need to be properly cared for, I countered, feeling my patience waning. I'm not infirm or incapable. Greg's smile didn't reach his eyes. All the more reason to make these arrangements now while you can participate in the process. Many families wait until there's a crisis, a fall, a health scare. We're being proactive. My phone buzzed in my purse, likely Rosa checking in as she had promised to do. I reached for it, welcoming the momentary distraction from this surreal conversation. Is that really necessary right now? Greg's voice carried a note of irritation as I retrieved my phone. I glanced at the screen. Indeed, a text from Rosa asking how the dinner was going. Just checking a message, I murmured, typing a quick, "we'll call later" response. Mum, Megan's voice was sharp. We're discussing important family matters. Who could possibly be texting you that's more important than this conversation? The condescension in her tone, as if I couldn't possibly have meaningful communications outside of her approved circle, sparked something in me. It's Rosa, actually, checking to make sure I'm okay. That interfering neighbor, Megan muttered. She's part of the problem, filling your head with ridiculous ideas about traveling at your age. I looked up from my phone, meeting my daughter's gaze directly. Rosa is my friend Megan. She respects my autonomy and supports my decisions, something I'm not feeling from you right now. Let me see what she's saying about us, Megan demanded, suddenly reaching across the table toward my phone. I instinctively pulled back. No, my phone is private just like yours is. What happened next occurred so quickly I barely had time to react. Megan lunged further across the table, her wineglass toppling unnoticed as she grabbed for my phone. Her fingers closed around it before I could secure my grip, and with a swift movement that seemed entirely foreign to the daughter I had raised, she yanked it from my hands. This ends now, she declared, her voice trembling with emotion. I couldn't fully identify. Anger, fear, control. Before I could protest, she raised her arm and slammed my phone down onto the Italian marble floor with shocking force. The sound of shattering glass and plastic echoed through the dining room. Fragments of my phone's screen scattered across the polished surface like tiny stars. A heavy silence followed. I stared at the broken device, then at my daughter's face. Her expression held no remorse, only grim satisfaction. Greg nodded slightly, his approval of her action evident in his posture. "You won't need this anymore," Megan said, her voice full of contempt that cut deeper than any physical blow could have. "I'll decide what's best for you." In that moment, looking at the stranger my daughter had become, I felt a curious calm settle over me. This wasn't a simple disagreement about my living arrangements or travel plans. This was a fundamental attempt to erase my personhood, to reduce me from mother to ward, from independent adult to managed dependent. Without speaking, I carefully placed my napkin beside my barely touched plate. I stood smoothing my dress with hands that remained surprisingly steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my body. "Where are you going?" Greg demanded, clearly surprised by my composed reaction. "We haven't finished our discussion." "I believe we have," I replied quietly, gathering my purse and the Italy trip documents. "There's nothing more to discuss when property destruction replaces conversation." Megan's face flushed. "Mom, you're overreacting. It's just a phone. We'll get you a simpler one that's easier to use." The condescension in her voice, the assumption that I couldn't manage a smartphone at my age, might have hurt me deeply just hours earlier. Now it merely confirmed what I needed to know. "Goodbye, Megan. Greg." I nodded to each of them and turned toward the foyer. "Mom, don't be ridiculous. Sit down," Megan called after me. "How are you even getting home?" I didn't answer as I walked to the front door. I had no idea how I would get home, having planned on Megan or Greg driving me as they usually did. But in that moment, the logistics seemed less important than maintaining my dignity. As I stepped outside into the cool evening air, I heard Greg's dismissive comment to Megan behind me. "Let her go. She'll calm down and be more reasonable tomorrow when she realizes she needs our help." They couldn't have been more wrong about what tomorrow would bring. The walk home from Megan and Greg's house would have taken nearly 2 hours, but fortune favored me that evening. Just 3 blocks from their neighborhood, I spotted a coffee shop still open despite the late hour. Inside, the barista, a young woman with kind eyes, allowed me to use the shop phone to call a rideshare, even offering me a free cup of tea while I waited. "Rough night?" she asked, noting my shaken appearance. "You could say that," I replied, managing a weak smile. "Family disagreement." She nodded sympathetically. "Those can be the worst kind." During the ride home, I stared out the window at passing streetlights, replaying the evening's events in my mind. The smashed phone kept appearing in my thoughts, not for the device itself, which could be replaced, but for what the act represented. The casual violence, the assertion of control, the utter disregard for boundaries and respect. These were not the values I had taught Megan. These were not actions motivated by genuine concern for my well-being. My house was dark when I arrived, the porch light I'd left on providing the only illumination. Inside, I moved through familiar rooms without turning on lamps, guided by memory and moonlight through the windows. In the stillness of my living room, surrounded by books and photographs and mementos from a life well lived, I finally allowed the tears to come. I cried for the daughter I thought I knew, for the relationship I had treasured, for the disrespect that had been shown not just to me, but to the home and values Frank and I had built together. I cried until exhaustion overtook me, falling asleep in my reading chair, with a throw blanket pulled around my shoulders. Morning light streaming through the windows woke me. For a brief, blessed moment, I existed in the liminal space between sleep and full consciousness, before memory rushed back with crushing clarity. My neck was stiff from sleeping upright, but the physical discomfort paled compared to the emotional pain that had settled in my chest like a stone. As I made my morning tea, a ritual that had steadied me through previous life crises, I noticed my hands were no longer trembling. Something had shifted during the night. The shock and hurt remained, but alongside them grew a quiet, firm resolve. This was not a situation that could be remedied with apologies or family therapy. What had happened at dinner represented the culmination of years of increasing control and diminishment. It would not improve without decisive action on my part. I had just finished my first cup of tea when a knock sounded at my back door. Rosa's distinctive pattern of 2 quick taps followed by a pause and a third tap. I opened the door to find my neighbor's face creased with concern. "You never called last night," she said without preamble. I was worried. "Come in." I invited, leading her to my kitchen table. As the kettle boiled for fresh tea, I recounted the previous evening's events, the retirement home brochure, the presumptuous legal documents, and finally the destruction of my phone. Rosa listened without interrupting her expression, shifting from concern to outrage. When I finished, she reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Celia, what happened last night wasn't just disrespectful. It was elder abuse." The term landed with uncomfortable weight. "Abuse seems strong," I hedged. "Megan thinks she's acting in my best interest. Breaking your property, attempting to control your finances and housing, isolating you from friends, infantilizing you. These are textbook control tactics." Rosa countered, her background in sociology evident in her analysis. "The fact that she's your daughter doesn't make it acceptable. It makes it a betrayal of trust." As we talked, my resolve crystallized into a plan. This was not a situation where standing my ground in place would be effective. Megan and Greg had demonstrated they were willing to escalate their control tactics. They had resources, influence, and a sense of righteous certainty about their actions. Continuing to resist while remaining accessible to them would only lead to more confrontations, more attempts at coercion. "I need to disappear," I said finally, the words surprising me even as they left my mouth. Rosa's eyebrows rose. "Disappear?" "Not permanently," I clarified. "But I need to remove myself from their reach while I establish clear boundaries and legal protections. If I stay here, they'll wear me down or find ways to force their agenda." Rosa was quiet for a moment, considering. Then she nodded slowly. "My guest house is available if you need a temporary sanctuary. It's private, comfortable, and no one would think to look for you there." Her offer touched me deeply. "Thank you, but I'm thinking of something more substantial. A clean break to reset this dynamic completely." As morning turned to afternoon, my plan took shape with Rosa's support. First, I needed a new phone, not just for practical purposes, but as a symbol of reclaiming what had been forcibly taken. Rosa drove me to the nearest electronics store, where I purchased a new smartphone and obtained a new number, ensuring Megan couldn't track my whereabouts through family sharing settings she had previously insisted upon for safety. Next came financial security. While Megan and Greg had drafted documents about controlling my assets, they had not yet implemented anything. I spent 2 hours at my bank, speaking with a trusted manager who had known me for years. I secured my accounts with new passwords and security measures, retrieved important documents from my safe deposit box, and ensured that no one could access my finances without my explicit permission, not even my daughter. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Anderson?" the bank manager asked, clearly concerned by my unusual requests. "Just taking some precautionary measures," I replied with a reassuring smile. "It's always good to review security periodically, isn't it?" Back home, I began the painful process of sorting through what I would need in the immediate future. Practical items were easy clothes, toiletries, medications. More difficult were the sentimental choices. Which photographs, which mementos from Frank, which tokens of a life built over decades could fit into 2 suitcases. In the end, I selected carefully. Our wedding photo. Frank's pocket watch, the first Mother's Day card Megan had made me in kindergarten, a poignant reminder of what our relationship had once been, and a few small items that carried outsized emotional significance. Everything else would remain in the house, which I had no intention of selling despite Megan and Greg's plans. As evening approached, I sat at my kitchen table writing a letter to Megan. The words came slowly, painfully, as I tried to balance honesty with compassion, firmness with love. "Dear Megan," I began. "By the time you read this, I will have left. Last night showed me that our relationship has deteriorated beyond what can be repaired through normal conversation. When you destroyed my phone and declared you would make decisions for me, you crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed without significant change." I continued for several pages, explaining my feelings, establishing my boundaries, and making clear that any future relationship would depend on respect for my autonomy. I did not disclose where I was going or how long I would be away. That information was mine to control now. I sealed the letter but did not leave it out. Rosa would deliver it later after I was safely away, and Megan had begun to realize the consequences of her actions. That night I called Barbara, my oldest friend from college, who had moved to Seattle years ago after her divorce. We had maintained our friendship through letters, emails, and occasional visits, though we hadn't seen each other in person since Frank's funeral. "Of course you can stay with me," Barbara said without hesitation when I explained the situation. "For as long as you need. My house is too big for just me anyway." Her immediate generosity brought tears to my eyes. "It might be several months, Barb. I need time to establish independence from this situation." "Take all the time you need," she assured me. "I've always wanted a roommate for my retirement adventures." With Barbara's invitation secured, I finalized travel arrangements, an early morning train to New York, then a flight to Seattle. I arranged for automatic payments of my utilities and mortgage, ensuring my house would be maintained in my absence. I packed methodically, practically including documents I might need to establish myself temporarily in a new city. My last task that evening was walking through each room of my beloved home, taking photographs with my new phone. The garden Frank had designed, the kitchen where we had taught Megan to bake, the living room where we had read thousands of bedtime stories. I wasn't saying goodbye to these spaces, but I needed to carry them with me into whatever came next. Rosa came over for a final cup of tea at 11 that night. She would check on my house regularly, collect my mail, and keep me updated on any developments. Most importantly, she would be my confidant, the only person besides Barbara who would know my whereabouts. "Are you sure about this?" she asked as we sat in my kitchen one last time. "It's a drastic step." "What happened last night was drastic," I replied quietly. "This isn't running away, Rosa. It's establishing necessary distance to rebuild on my terms, not theirs." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Then I'll see you tomorrow before dawn. Try to get some sleep, Celia." Sleep, however, proved elusive. I lay in bed watching shadows move across my ceiling, thinking about Emma and Tyler, wondering if they would miss their grandmother, hoping this separation would be brief enough that they wouldn't forget me. I thought about Megan as a child, curious, kind, affectionate, and tried to reconcile that memory with the cold-eyed woman who had smashed my phone. I thought about Frank, wishing I could ask his advice, though. In my heart, I knew he would support my decision to protect myself. Around 4 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and rose to prepare for departure. I dressed comfortably for travel, double-checked my packed bags, and ate a light breakfast I couldn't taste. As the first hint of dawn lightened the sky, I took one last look around my home, then stepped outside to where Rosa waited in her car at the curb. "Ready?" she asked gently. "As I'll ever be," I replied, sliding into the passenger seat with my 2 suitcases stowed in the trunk. As we drove away from the home I had shared with Frank for nearly 40 years, I didn't look back. This wasn't an ending, but a beginning. The first chapter of reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my right to self-determination. Whatever happened next would be on my terms, not Megan's. The train to New York departed on schedule, carrying me away from Boston, just as the city was waking up. By the time Megan realized I was gone, I would be halfway to Seattle, beyond her reach, but not, I hoped, beyond eventual reconciliation on new, healthier terms. Rosa's text arrived as my flight from New York began its descent into Seattle. "M came by your house around noon. Seemed angry at first, then concerned when she realized you weren't home. Called your old number repeatedly. No idea you have a new phone or that you've left town." I stared at the message, imagining Megan's increasing frustration as her calls went unanswered. Part of me ached at causing her distress, while another part recognized this consequence as necessary for breaking the unhealthy dynamic between us. Barbara was waiting at the arrival gate, her familiar smile a beacon in the unfamiliar airport. At 65, she remained as vibrant as she had been in our college days, with her signature red hair now threaded with silver and laugh lines around her eyes that spoke of a life well enjoyed. "Look at you," she exclaimed, embracing me warmly. "Still elegant as ever, even after a cross-country flight." The drive to Barbara's home in Seattle's outskirts revealed a landscape utterly different from Boston's historic density. Evergreen trees stretched toward cloudy skies, mountains loomed in the distance, and the air carried a fresh scent, unlike the Atlantic breeze I was accustomed to. Barbara's house was a comfortable craftsman-style home on a quiet street, with a garden bursting with rhododendrons and a view of Puget Sound from the upstairs windows. The guest room she had prepared for me featured a writing desk positioned to capture the view, bookshelves filled with novels I had mentioned enjoying over the years, and a quilted bedspread in my favorite shade of blue. "I want you to feel at home here," Barbara said, helping me unpack. "This isn't just a hiding place, Celia. It's a chance to rediscover yourself away from expectations and demands." That first evening in Seattle passed quietly, as Barbara and I caught up on years of life events condensed into hours of conversation. She had built a fulfilling post-divorce life, balancing her work as a part-time legal consultant with volunteer activities and a rich social circle. Her children lived in California, visiting several times a year in relationships she described as mutually respectful and adult. "They know I'm capable and independent," she explained as we shared a bottle of Washington wine. "And I know they're living their own lives. We enjoy each other without expectation or obligation." It sounded like the relationship I had once imagined having with Megan as we both aged, supportive but separate, loving but not enmeshed. The contrast with my current reality stung. My phone buzzed with another update from Rosa. "M called the police for wellness check. Officers came by. I explained you're traveling and fine. They seemed satisfied. M less so. She left looking worried." The next morning brought more messages from Rosa detailing Megan's escalating concern. She had called several hospitals, filed a missing person report, which the police hadn't taken seriously, given Rosa's confirmation of my voluntary departure, and begun contacting my library colleagues and book club friends. "No one knows anything," Rosa reported. "Your plan worked perfectly." I felt a complex mixture of vindication and guilt. The mother in me hated causing Megan worry, while the woman in me recognized that her concern stemmed from loss of control rather than fear for my well-being. If she had truly been concerned about my health and happiness, she would never have tried to force me into a retirement home against my will, or destroyed my property in a show of dominance. By the third day in Seattle, I had established a tentative routine. Mornings began with coffee on Barbara's deck, watching ferries cross the Sound. Afternoons were spent exploring my new temporary neighborhood, learning bus routes, and discovering local bookstores and cafes. Evenings brought conversations with Barbara and occasional dinner guests, friends of hers who welcomed me without prying questions about why I had suddenly relocated across the country. A week into my self-imposed exile, Rosa reported that Megan had found her number in my address book and made contact. "She came to my door demanding to know where you are," Rosa wrote. "I told her I respect your privacy and your choices. She threatened to sue me for interfering in a family matter. I suggested she consult her own attorney about the legality of attempting to control her competent adult mother's finances and housing." The confrontation I had anticipated was unfolding in my absence. Part of me wished I could witness Megan's realization that her plans had been thwarted, while a deeper part was grateful for the distance that allowed me to process my feelings without her immediate influence. "Is it time to send the letter?" I asked Rosa during our nightly phone call. "I think so," she agreed. "She's reached the stage where she might actually read it rather than dismissing it." The following day, Rosa delivered my sealed letter to Megan. Hours later, my phone rang with an unknown number. Megan had apparently obtained my new contact information, likely from a mutual acquaintance who didn't understand the situation's complexity. I let the call go to voicemail, not yet ready for direct communication. Her message was a mixture of anger and concern. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You've got everyone worried sick. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Call me back immediately so we can discuss your return home like rational adults." The condescending tone, the assumption that my actions were merely to make a point, rather than establish necessary boundaries, confirmed I had made the right decision in creating distance. 3 weeks into my stay with Barbara, I had begun to feel less like a refugee and more like someone building a temporary life. Barbara introduced me to her book club, where I was welcomed without interrogation about my sudden appearance in Seattle. I found a volunteer position at the local library shelving books 2 mornings a week, familiar work that grounded me in a routine. Rosa continued providing updates from Boston. Megan had hired a private investigator to find me a development that troubled me deeply. The escalation suggested she saw my independence as a challenge to overcome rather than a boundary to respect. Time to involve legal protection, Barbara advised when I shared this news. As a retired attorney, she understood the importance of formalizing boundaries when informal methods proved insufficient. With Barbara's guidance, I engaged Eleanor Simmons, an elder law attorney in Seattle, who specialized in autonomy and boundary issues. Eleanor listened to my situation without judgment, then outlined a clear strategy for establishing legal protection of my independence. "Your daughter has no legal authority over your decisions, finances, or housing," Eleanor assured me. "But we can take steps to ensure that remains the case, regardless of pressure tactics." Over the next week, Eleanor prepared formal correspondence to Megan establishing clear legal boundaries. The letter sent from Eleanor's office to Megan's home stated unequivocally that I was of sound mind and body living independently by choice, and that any attempts to force guardianship, control my assets, or make decisions regarding my housing would be vigorously contested in court. "This should discourage any attempts to claim you're incompetent or in need of supervision," Eleanor explained. "It also serves notice that you have legal representation aware of the situation." The lawyer's letter achieved what my personal communication couldn't. It shifted the dynamic from emotional to legal, from family disagreement to potential court battle. Megan, for all her determination to control my life, was not prepared to fight a legal case she would likely lose, especially with Greg's business reputation potentially affected by allegations of elder financial exploitation. As spring blossomed in Seattle, I found myself experiencing unexpected joy in my temporary exile. Barbara and I took weekend drives to the Olympic Peninsula, explored Pike Place Market, and attended symphony performances. I developed a particular fondness for a small bookstore cafe near her home, where the owner, a woman about my age named Judith, shared my passion for mystery novels and strong coffee. The distance from Megan brought clarity rather than resolution. I missed my grandchildren fiercely, finding myself tearing up whenever I saw children Emma and Tyler's ages in parks or stores. To maintain some connection, I sent anonymous packages of books to them through a mutual friend who understood the complexity of the situation, ensuring they wouldn't forget their grandmother entirely during our separation. 4 months into my Seattle sojourn, I felt ready for limited, controlled communication with Megan. After consultation with Eleanor, I sent a brief email to my daughter, breaking the silence for the first time since my departure. "Megan, I am safe and well. I needed this time away to reflect on the events that led to my decision to leave without notice. I am not ready to return to Boston or to resume our previous relationship pattern. I am, however, open to beginning a conversation about how we might build a healthier relationship based on mutual respect and recognition of boundaries. If you are willing to engage on these terms, please reply to this email. Celia." Her response came within hours, a wall of text filled with accusations, questions, and demands. Why had I left without telling her? Didn't I understand how worried she had been? How could I abandon my grandchildren? When was I coming home? She needed my house keys to check on things. Greg thought I was being manipulated by that neighbor. They still had a spot reserved at Golden Sunset if I would just be reasonable. Not a word of apology for smashing my phone. Not a hint of recognition that her controlling behavior had precipitated my departure. Not a sign that she understood the fundamental issue at stake, my right to self-determination. I showed the email to Barbara, who shook her head sadly. "She's still not hearing you, Celia. She's hearing her own narrative about a mother who needs management rather than respect." After careful consideration and consultation with Eleanor, I replied with a shorter, clearer message. "I left because you broke my property, threatened my autonomy, and stated your intention to control my finances and housing against my will. I will not discuss returning to Boston until you acknowledge these actions and commit to respecting my independence going forward. I love you and miss the children, but I will not sacrifice my dignity for access to my family. 2 weeks passed without response. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Rosa called rather than texted, a signal we had established for important developments. "Megan came by your house today," she reported. "She was alone, no Greg. She sat on your porch steps for almost an hour, just staring at the garden. When she left, I approached her. She asked if I'd heard from you. When I said yes, she asked if you were safe and happy. I told her you were both." "What did she say to that?" I asked, my heart beating faster. "She said, 'That's good. That's good to know.' Then she asked if you might ever come back to Boston. I told her that was entirely up to her." "Up to her? How so?" "I told her you would return when she was ready to see you as a whole person deserving of respect, not as a problem to be managed." Rosa's voice carried a hint of satisfaction. She didn't argue. She nodded and left. This small interaction represented the first crack in Megan's certainty, the first hint that she might be reconsidering her approach. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a beginning. 5 months after my abrupt departure from Boston, I requested a video call with my grandchildren. Megan agreed, setting strict parameters, 30 minutes with her present, throughout no discussion of when I would return or why I had left. Seeing Emma and Tyler on screen after months apart brought tears I couldn't control. They had grown, Emma missing a front tooth, Tyler speaking in full sentences now, changes I should have witnessed in person. "Grandma, where are you?" Emma asked, pressing her face close to the camera. "Your house looks different." "I'm visiting a friend in Seattle," I explained, careful to honor Megan's boundaries while not lying to the children. "It's very green here with mountains and water." "Do you have books there?" Tyler asked, remembering our reading sessions. "So many books," I assured him. "And I'm helping at a library here too, just like at home." Megan sat silently in the background, watching our interaction with an unreadable expression. When our allotted time ended, she instructed the children to say goodbye, then appeared alone on screen after they left the room. "They miss you," she said simply. "I miss them too. And you," I added honestly. She nodded once, her composure slipping slightly. "The lawyer's letter. Was that necessary?" "Yes," I replied without elaboration. "It was." "Greg thinks this whole situation is ridiculous. He says you're being manipulated by your friends." "I'm not being manipulated, Megan. I'm making my own choices, as is my right." She was quiet for a moment, then asked the question I had been waiting for. "Are you ever coming back?" "That depends," I said carefully, "on whether there's a place for me to return to where I'll be respected as an autonomous adult rather than managed as a dependent person." "You're my mother," she said, as if that explained and justified everything. "Yes, and I'm also a complete person with the right to make my own decisions, even decisions you disagree with." The call ended soon after, unresolved but not hostile. It represented a tiny step toward potential reconciliation, though the path ahead remained unclear and likely difficult. As summer turned to fall in Seattle, I made a decision that surprised even me. After 6 months away from Boston, I was ready to return, not to resume the old patterns with Megan, but to reclaim my home and community while maintaining the boundaries I had established during my absence. "Are you sure?" Barbara asked as we discussed my plans over dinner. "You've built something good here." "I have," I agreed, looking around at the life I had constructed in Seattle. New friends, volunteer work, a weekly writing group I had joined at Judith's bookstore. "And I'll carry it with me. But Boston is my home. My house is there. My garden. My history with Frank." "And Megan," Barbara added gently. "Yes. We need to find a new way forward in person rather than across the country. Whether that's possible remains to be seen, but I need to try." The night before my flight back to Boston, I sat on Barbara's deck, watching the sun set over Puget Sound, reflecting on the unexpected journey of the past 6 months. I had arrived in Seattle broken-hearted and uncertain, fleeing a situation that threatened my autonomy. I was leaving stronger, clearer about my boundaries and prepared to defend them. "Whatever happens with Megan," Barbara said, joining me with glasses of wine, "remember you can always come back here. You have options now." Options. The word resonated deeply. My self-imposed exile had accomplished what I had hoped. It had shifted the power dynamic with Megan by demonstrating my capacity for independent action. More importantly, it had reminded me of my own strength and resilience. Rosa met my flight in Boston, her familiar face a welcome sight as I emerged from the jetway. "Welcome home, warrior," she greeted me with a hug. "Your house is waiting garden thriving, and daughter nervously anticipating your return." "Nervously?" I questioned as we retrieved my luggage. "I may have mentioned you were coming back today. She called 3 times asking if you needed a ride from the airport. I told her you had arrangements already." The message was clear. Megan wanted to reconnect, but was respecting the boundaries I had established through Eleanor. It was a promising sign, though I remained cautious about reading too much into it. My house welcomed me like an old friend, everything exactly as I had left it, but somehow renewed through my absence. I spent that first evening reacquainting myself with familiar spaces, running my hands over bookshelves Frank had built sleeping in our bed, with a sense of rightness I hadn't fully appreciated before leaving. Megan called the following morning. "Mom, Rosa said you're home." "Yes, I arrived yesterday," I confirmed, keeping my tone neutral. A pause then. "Could we meet somewhere to talk?" We arranged to meet at a cafe halfway between our homes, neutral territory where neither of us would have the home court advantage. I arrived early, selecting a corner table that offered both privacy and visibility to others, a precaution Eleanor had suggested for this first in-person encounter. Megan appeared precisely on time, looking thinner than I remembered, and less polished, as if the perfect exterior she maintained had required energy she no longer possessed. She hesitated before taking the seat across from me, her eyes scanning my face as if searching for changes. "You look well," she said finally. "Seattle agreed with you." "It did," I acknowledged. "It was good for me in many ways." We ordered coffee, the familiar ritual providing structure to this unfamiliar situation. When the server departed, Megan placed her hands flat on the table, a gesture reminiscent of Frank when he was preparing to say something difficult. "I've been seeing a therapist," she began, surprising me. "After you left, after the lawyer's letter, I realized something was very wrong with how I had been behaving. I remained silent, allowing her space to continue. "Greg and I are having problems," she admitted. "My therapist helped me see patterns in both relationships, with him and with you. Control patterns." She swallowed hard. "I'm still working through it, but I wanted you to know I understand more now about why you felt you had to leave. It wasn't a direct apology for smashing my phone or attempting to force me into a retirement home, but it was an acknowledgement of the underlying issue. It was a beginning." "Thank you for telling me," I said carefully. "Understanding is an important first step." Our conversation continued cautiously, navigating around still tender topics, while establishing new parameters for communication. Megan didn't ask when I would visit her home or mention Greg at all, beyond her brief reference to their troubles. Instead, she suggested Emma and Tyler might visit my house the following weekend. "If you're comfortable with that." The qualification, recognizing my right to set boundaries around my own space, represented a significant shift from her previous approach. I agreed to the visit, my heart lightening at the prospect of reconnecting with my grandchildren in my own home on my own terms. As we prepared to leave, Megan hesitated, then reached into her purse and withdrew a small wrapped package. "I got you this. It doesn't fix anything, but I wanted you to have it." Inside the wrapping paper was a new phone, not the latest model I had purchased in Seattle, but a senior-focused device with large buttons and simplified features. It was exactly the type of phone she and Greg had discussed getting me after destroying my smartphone, a device designed for someone they perceived as less capable. The gift represented Megan's continued misunderstanding, her persistent view of me as someone needing accommodation rather than respect. Yet I recognized the gesture as well-intentioned, an attempt to make amends within the framework of understanding she currently possessed. "Thank you for the thought," I said, gently returning the package to her. "I already have a phone that meets my needs perfectly, but I appreciate the gesture behind this one." Confusion crossed her face, followed by a flash of the old defensiveness quickly replaced by reluctant understanding. "Of course, I should have realized." We parted with a brief hug, the first physical contact since before my departure, and a tentative plan for the grandchildren's visit. As I watched her walk to her car, I felt neither triumph nor defeat, but rather cautious hope that we had taken the first small step on a long road toward rebuilding our relationship on healthier terms. The day of Emma and Tyler's visit dawned bright and clear, a perfect early autumn Saturday in Boston. I had prepared for their arrival with both excitement and trepidation, baking their favorite cookies, setting up art supplies on the porch, selecting books for potential reading time. I wanted everything to be perfect, while recognizing that perfection was neither possible nor necessary. Megan arrived precisely on time, the children tumbling out of her car with energy that instantly transformed my quiet house. Emma ran straight to me for a hug, while Tyler hung back momentarily, studying me with serious eyes, before deciding I was indeed the grandmother he remembered. "I'll pick them up at 4, Megan said, remaining on the porch rather than entering uninvited. "Call if you need anything, or if they're too much." The consideration in her approach, respecting my space, acknowledging my competence while offering support, suggested she was genuinely trying to implement the insights from her therapy. I appreciated the effort, even while recognizing we had a long journey ahead. The afternoon with Emma and Tyler unfolded in a blend of familiar routines and new discoveries. We baked additional cookies when they devoured the first batch, painted watercolors on the porch, and read 3 chapters of a new children's novel I had discovered in Seattle. Tyler showed me his improved vocabulary, proudly pronouncing hypothesis when we conducted a simple science experiment with baking soda and vinegar. Emma shared details about her dance classes and first-grade teacher information I had missed during my months away. Neither child asked directly why I had been gone so long, accepting my explanation about visiting my friend Barbara in Seattle without question. The resilience of children, their ability to adapt to changed circumstances without the complicated emotional overlays adults bring, struck me as both a blessing and a reminder of how differently Megan and I had experienced our separation. At 4 o'clock, Megan returned as promised. The children greeted her with enthusiasm, showing off their artwork and recounting our activities. She listened with genuine interest, making appropriate comments about their creative efforts. "Would you like to come in for tea?" I offered as the children gathered their belongings. It was a small olive branch extending beyond the agreed parameters of the visit. Megan hesitated, surprise crossing her features. Yes, that would be nice, if you're sure." Over tea at my kitchen table, the same table where we had shared countless meals throughout her childhood, Megan and I maintained careful conversation, focused primarily on the children. She mentioned they had been asking about their grandfather, recently wondering about the man they had never met. "I've been showing them photos," she said, stirring her tea, "trying to help them understand who he was." "I have videos," I offered, "if you'd like copies for them. Frank reading bedtime stories, building that treehouse in the backyard, teaching you to ride a bike." Emotion flickered across Megan's face. "I'd forgotten about those videos. Yes, I'd like that. They should know him, even if only through memories." As they prepared to leave, Emma asked the question I had been both hoping for and dreading. "Can we come back next weekend, Grandma?" I glanced at Megan, not wanting to overstep. She nodded slightly, leaving the decision to me. "I'd love that," I told Emma. "Maybe we could visit the Children's Museum if the weather isn't good for the park." "With Mama, too?" Tyler asked, looking between us with innocent hope. The question hung in the air, loaded with implications beyond his understanding. Megan's expression remained carefully neutral, neither encouraging nor discouraging my response. "If your mama would like to join us, she's welcome," I said finally, offering another small step toward rebuilding. "We'll see," Megan replied diplomatically, helping Tyler with his jacket. "Let's not make plans too far ahead." After they departed, I sat in my reading chair by the front window, watching darkness gather outside while processing the day's interactions. Progress had been made, tentative, fragile progress that could easily shatter with one wrong move from either of us. But it was progress nonetheless. Over the following weeks, a new pattern emerged. The children visited regularly, sometimes with Megan staying for tea afterward, sometimes with her leaving them in my care for increasingly longer periods. Our conversations remained carefully constrained to safe topics: the children's activities, neighborhood happenings, my volunteer work at the library. We circled the deeper issues without directly addressing them, both seemingly afraid to disrupt the delicate equilibrium we had established. Greg remained conspicuously absent from these interactions. Megan never mentioned him during our brief conversations, and I didn't ask. Through Rosa's network of neighborhood connections, I learned that rumors of their marital troubles had increased, with Greg reportedly staying at their vacation home on Cape Cod, while Megan remained in the main house with the children. 2 months after my return to Boston, as Thanksgiving approached, Megan finally broached the subject during one of our after-visit teas. "Greg and I are separating," she said without preamble, her fingers tight around her teacup. "It's been coming for some time, but your departure accelerated things." I waited, sensing there was more she needed to say. "My therapist helped me see the parallels between how Greg treated me and how we both treated you." She stared into her tea as if reading revelations in the leaves. The constant criticism disguised as concern, the undermining of confidence, the financial control. She looked up then, meeting my eyes directly for perhaps the first time since my return. "I'm sorry about your phone, about all of it. I became someone I never wanted to be, someone who would hurt her own mother to maintain control." The apology, though long overdue, touched me deeply. "Thank you for saying that," I replied quietly. "It means a great deal to hear you acknowledge what happened. I don't expect forgiveness," she continued, her voice steadier now. "But I want you to know I'm working to understand why I behaved that way and to ensure I never do it again. Not to you, not to the children, not to anyone." "Awareness is the first step toward change," I offered, remembering words my own mother had shared decades earlier. Megan nodded, then hesitated before asking, "Would you consider spending Thanksgiving with us, just me and the children at our house? Greg will be with his parents in Connecticut." The invitation represented more than a holiday meal. It was an invitation to re-enter a space where I had last experienced profound disrespect and violation. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us. "I'd like that," I said after consideration. "But I think I'd be more comfortable hosting here in my home. You and the children are welcome to join me." She accepted the counter-proposal without argument, another small sign of her growing respect for my boundaries. We made tentative plans for the holiday meal, dividing cooking responsibilities and discussing menu options, as if rebuilding our relationship through the familiar territory of shared family traditions. Thanksgiving itself proved both healing and illuminating. Emma and Tyler filled my house with energy and laughter, helping me set the table with Frank's good china and arranging autumn leaves in a centerpiece of their own design. Megan arrived with dishes she had prepared, and a bottle of wine, dressed simply in jeans and a sweater, rather than the designer outfits Greg had preferred. During dinner, I noticed subtle changes in Megan's interactions with the children: less rigid correction of their behavior, more patient responses to their questions, genuine laughter at their jokes. She seemed more relaxed, more present, more like the daughter I remembered before Greg's influence had reshaped her. After the children went to the living room to watch a movie, Megan helped me clean the kitchen, falling into the rhythms we had established years ago during countless family gatherings. As we worked side by side, she spoke softly, almost to herself. "I'm selling the big house. It never really felt like home." "Where will you go?" I asked, careful to maintain a neutral tone. I've found a smaller place closer to the children's school. 3 bedrooms, a garden for them to play in. Something I can manage on my own income. She rinsed a plate, adding, Greg's fighting it, of course. He says the house is an investment we shouldn't liquidate. But it's your decision, I observed, noting how she straightened her shoulders as she nodded. Yes, my decision. For my children. She placed the last dish in the drying rack. I've learned a lot from watching you stand your ground, Mum. More than you know. The comment caught me by surprise. The idea that my actions had modelled strength for Megan, that my refusal to be controlled, had somehow helped her recognise and resist control in her own marriage. It added a dimension of meaning to the painful separation we had endured, suggesting that perhaps something valuable had emerged from the broken pieces of our relationship. As winter settled over Boston, bringing holidays and new traditions, Megan and I continued our cautious reconciliation. The children now spent 1 weekend day each week at my house, sometimes with Megan joining us for activities, sometimes with her using the time to manage her increasingly complicated divorce proceedings. Greg's initial attempts to maintain control over Megan financially and emotionally gradually gave way to grudging acceptance that the marriage was indeed ending. Their house sold quickly despite his resistance, and Megan moved with the children to the smaller home she had chosen, a charming colonial with a fenced yard and proximity to both school and my neighbourhood. The 1-year anniversary of my disappearance arrived in early spring. Rosa organised a small dinner at her home to mark the occasion, inviting several friends who had supported me through the ordeal. We shared a meal and reflections on the year's journey, from crisis to empowerment, from rupture to tentative healing. To Celia, Rosa toasted, raising her glass, who taught us all that it's never too late to stand up for yourself and write a new chapter. Later that evening, as I walked the short distance home under stars appearing between departing clouds, I thought about the journey of the past year. I had left Boston broken-hearted, fleeing a situation that threatened my autonomy and dignity. I had returned stronger, clearer about my boundaries, and prepared to defend them while remaining open to genuine reconciliation. The relationship with Megan remained a work in progress, improved but still fragile, with moments of connection, interspersed with echoes of old patterns we both worked to recognize and avoid. The grandchildren thrived in our renewed contact, accepting the changed family dynamics with the resilience of youth. Greg remained a peripheral figure, appearing only in necessary communications regarding the children's schedules and needs. My life had expanded in unexpected ways through this crisis. I maintained regular contact with Barbara and my Seattle friends, planning a summer visit to reconnect with the community that had sheltered me during my time of need. I had deepened my involvement with the Boston Library's senior programs, drawing on insights from my own experience to help other older adults assert their independence and dignity. Most importantly, I had reclaimed my sense of self, not just as Megan's mother or Frank's,